Yoriichi Tsugikuni was the strongest human who ever lived in the Demon Slayer universe, and was the only one to even come close to killing Muzan for 500 years. But despite his terrifying abilities, Yoriichi didn't really achieve much, especially in terms of saving his family and serving the Demon Slayer Corps. In today's video, I'll explore what would happen if Yoriichi Tsugikuni got a second shot, and was reborn with his powers and memories. Now, I don't want to change too much from the original timeline, so let's not change anything right up until Yoriichi's death. Yoriichi died just as he raised his sword to strike Kokushibo, at an age of over 800 years. The ability to outlive the curse of the Demon Slayer mark and being born with access to the transparent world establishes that something supernatural was going on with Yoriichi. It's almost as if he was put on Earth as a counter to the Demon King. But here's the issue. Yoriichi fails to kill Muzan. His wife and unborn child are killed by demons, and his brother becomes the Demon King's most loyal general. At the moment of his death, Yoriichi is filled with the regrets of his lifetime, and desperately wishes for another chance to set things right. The sheer force of his will, together with his supernatural constitution, allow for Yoriichi's soul to be sent back in time, right back to the moment where he saw the transparent world for the first time. Now, before we talk about what he'd do, we need to understand the kind of regrets Yoriichi was carrying, and it all begins at the time he was born. Yoriichi was born with the Demon Slayer mark on his forehead, and that naturally marked him as a freak, even within his own family. His mother was the only one who truly cared for him, and shortly after her death, he mysteriously left the family. Yoriichi's life continued to be filled with misfortune, and probably the only good thing that happened to him was befriending Sumiyoshi Kamado. But of all of Yoriichi's regrets, 4 major ones stand out, so let's go through them one by one. The first regret is obvious. In the canon timeline, Yoriichi encountered Kibutsuji Muzan, the progenitor of all demon kind, and came within a breath of ending him. And we're not just talking defeat in a duel. Yoriichi had Muzan in a state of utter helplessness. The demon who was considered more devastating than a natural disaster was reduced to a cornered animal by a single human swordsman. But then Muzan split himself into 1,800 separate pieces and fled in every direction simultaneously. Yoriichi destroyed approximately 1,500 of them on the spot, but the remaining fragments reassembled and Muzan survived. But even more importantly, Muzan lost control of Tamayo, proving that his hold over demonkind could be broken if enough damage was done to the Demon King. After that moment, Muzan never showed himself to Yoriichi again. He was so traumatized by the encounter that he spent the next 4 centuries obsessed with sun breathing and its users, hunting them to extinction to ensure that no one could ever replicate what Yoriichi did to him. Yoriichi doesn't need to see the future to realize the implications of letting the Demon King escape. In the final decades of his life, he would have witnessed the countless deaths caused by demon attacks, all of which could have been avoided if he finished off Muzan that day. But Yoriichi's second regret is even more emotionally devastating, because unlike Muzan's escape tactics, it was something within his control. Michikatsu Tsugikuni, Yoriichi's older twin brother, became Kokushibo, the Upper Moon One. Kokushibo stood above the rest as the second most powerful demon in existence, and served Muzan for 400 years. And it was all driven by him spending every waking moment trying to surpass a brother he could never catch. Michikatsu's downward spiral began in childhood, as the Tsugikuni household had conditional affection. From the time the twins were born, Michikatsu was the golden child and the intended heir, with their father deciding to eventually send Yoriichi to a monastery where he became an adult. Yoriichi was always a recluse who clung to his mother, but after her death, Yoriichi's unconscious brilliance began to emerge. Michikatsu had been training as a swordsman since he was a child, but the first day Yoriichi tried it, he beat Michikatsu's instructor. Yoriichi seemed to have inexhaustible strength and stamina, and quietly equips Michikatsu at every turn without ever meaning to. However, Yoriichi left the family of his own accord once he became an adult, making Michikatsu the family head by default. Michikatsu went on to become a samurai, get married, and have 2 kids. But one day, his battalion was attacked by demons. He was the last man standing, ready to face his death, when suddenly Yoriichi appeared and eliminated all the demons. This kick-started Michikatsu's insecurities once more, and he left his family to join the Demon Slayers in hopes of catching up to Yoriichi. Michikatsu quickly surpassed all their Demon Slayers, awakened his Demon Slayer mark, and invented moon breathing, but he was still unable to reach Yoriichi's level. Then add adult pressures. Michikatsu awakened the Demon Slayer mark and was told it would kill him before age 25. He feared dying without legacy and without ever truly surpassing his brother. Muzan found him at exactly the peak of his fear and frustration, and offered him the only thing Yoriichi didn't have: immortality. What makes this regret so specific is that Yoriichi genuinely didn't see it coming. He was emotionally perceptive in almost every other area of his life, but he completely missed the jealousy festering inside Michikatsu. To Yoriichi, Michikatsu was simply the kind older brother who pitied him when no one else did, and he kept the flute Michikatsu gave him as a child until the day he died. When Yoriichi found out, it broke him, and the man who almost never showed emotion wept at what his brother had become. Eventually, Yoriichi would fight Kokushibo when he was 80 years old and on the verge of death, and even though he still had the necessary strength, Yoriichi couldn't bring himself to kill his brother. But if you think things look tragic now, wait till you hear about Yoriichi's biggest regret. You see, Yoriichi was a man who wanted almost nothing for himself, and the one dream he had was to lead a quiet life with his family. He found that for a a single, brief window, when he met a young woman named Uta after her family was killed by a plague. Yoriichi stayed with her as a travel companion, and after 10 years, they married. I can't overstate the importance of this, because Yoriichi didn't open up to anyone at all, but Uta alone was able to win his heart. Eventually, Uta became pregnant, and for the first time in his life, Yoriichi had something of his own to love and protect. After a few months, Yoriichi had to leave to find a midwife, but on the way back, he stopped to help an elderly man who needed assistance. It was well after dark when Yoriichi arrived and found Uta dead, and she was killed by a demon while he was gone. He held Uta's body for 10 days without eating or drinking, until a demon slayer found him eventually and told Yoriichi to bury her. Yoriichi probably wouldn't have joined the demon slayer corps in the first place had Uta still been alive, but that tragedy forced him onto his path. If you told Yoriichi he could have one thing back, he would not say Muzan's death. Saving Uta's life is definitely the one thing that would make him return. Yoriichi's final regret is the least painful of them all, but it matters more than fans usually like to acknowledge. After Muzan escaped and Michikatsu fell, Yoriichi was banished from the demon slayer corps. The stated reasons were his failure against Muzan, and most controversially, his brother's transformation into a literal demon. After Yoriichi's departure, the corps lost the qualities that made it known as the golden era of demon slayers. Nobody could teach breathing styles the way Yoriichi could. He tailored instruction to each individual's body and style, which required a level of perception that only Yoriichi possessed. The techniques degraded, and sun breathing was erased entirely from the corps, along with concepts like demon slayer marks, the transparent world, and the selfless state. Sun breathing only survived thanks to Sumiyoshi Kamado, who memorized and preserved it across generations for reasons Yoriichi himself didn't fully believe in. Meanwhile, Muzan and Kokushibo spent the following centuries systematically hunting and killing the strongest Hashira they could find, and the damage compounded over generations. If Yoriichi somehow stayed involved in the corps, he could help them improve, or at least maintain the same level for a few more decades. Okay, now we have the 4 regrets, so let's talk strategy. Yoriichi's biggest regret is actually the easiest to solve, because there's nothing technically difficult about saving Uta. Yoriichi knows the knight, and he knows the demon. In this timeline, he doesn't waste time helping old men. He returns home before sunset. Once the demon attacks, it doesn't really matter that Yoriichi doesn't have a Nichirin sword yet, because we know that even the likes of Gyomei and Sanemi could defeat demons with regular weapons. So once Yoriichi gets his hands on the demon that killed his wife in a past life, that poor guy is getting absolutely wrecked by a force of nature strong enough to kill Muzan. But this changes everything for our storyline, because Uta isn't a subplot. She's the foundation of our story. A Yoriichi who doesn't lose Uta doesn't spend years wandering the countryside in hollow grief. He's a happy and fulfilled man who joins the Demon Slayer Corps because he wants to protect humanity, not because he has nothing left to lose. Yoriichi once broke down crying when he lifted Sumiyoshi's child into the air and heard her laugh, because that laugh was the joy his unborn child never got to have. Imagine instead a Yoriichi who gets to hear his own child laugh. What does that do to a man who already believed the world was beautiful? Yoriichi's will to save others is so much stronger in this timeline because he isn't emotionally desensitized by his trauma anymore. But now we have a trickier challenge: Michikatsu. Honestly, one option would be for Yoriichi to let his brother die on the battlefield when demons attack. Think about it. Michikatsu has practically forgotten about his rivalry with Yoriichi. He's respected as the Tsugikuni family head, and he could die a warrior's death. His decisions in the original timeline bring disgrace to his name before he even becomes a demon, because he abandons his station as a samurai and leaves his family as well. But we all know that Yoriichi isn't going to make such a cold and logical calculation. So Yoriichi still goes to that battlefield and saves Michikatsu's life, driving his twin brother to join the Demon Slayers. Making sure Michikatsu's inferiority complex doesn't get to him is a bit difficult, but the key insight is that Michikatsu's resentment wasn't born from anything Yoriichi did maliciously. Yoriichi was simply better in every way, and given the nature of their upbringing, that made Michikatsu feel worthless. What made things even worse was the fact that Yoriichi never expressed himself and built a connection with Michikatsu, so he always felt a need to prove that he was better than Yoriichi. So now our fix is simple. The reborn version of Yoriichi starts talking. Yoriichi starts this right from the time they're children, and makes sure that Michikatsu knows how much Yoriichi respects and cherishes him. You could argue that Yoriichi isn't one to engage in this kind of manipulation, but the thing is, he's not being dishonest. This is Yoriichi finally being emotionally honest in a way his first life never allowed him to be. Now speaking up when they're kids doesn't fix everything, because Michikatsu's pride and his fear of mortality are internal to him. However, Yoriichi avoids amplifying Michikatsu's insecurities, and Michikatsu, who knows his brother loves him and isn't carrying decades of unprocessed inferiority, is significantly more resistant to Muzan's offer. But Yoriichi also has a plan for their adult life. Since he invented breathing styles, Yoriichi became the center of attention in the Demon Slayer Corps, further compounding Michikatsu's need to prove himself. But in this timeline, Yoriichi takes a step back and lets Michikatsu take the spotlight. When new recruits join, he points to Michikatsu, the former samurai, as their mentor. Yoriichi knows which missions Michikatsu can handle on his own, so he turns over some of them to his brother under the excuse of wanting wanting to spend time with Uta. This is a pretty believable excuse, and more importantly, it gives Michikatsu way more opportunities to distinguish himself as the legendary Moon Hashira. So as time passes, their reputation grows much closer. Yes, Yoriichi is a prodigy and the creator of sun breathing, but he's a semi-active demon slayer who prefers to spend time with his wife and kids. Meanwhile, Michikatsu has devoted his life to the way of the sword. He's a mentor of the core and has many more achievements on the battlefield. His position as a leader among the swordsmen gives Michikatsu confidence and a sense of purpose, two things he severely lacked in the canon timeline. But everything Yoriichi is doing here is basically a formality to make his brother feel better. He already has a plan to ensure Kokushibo is never created, because if Muzan is already dead before the offer is even made, the question of Michikatsu becoming a demon is completely irrelevant. And this brings me to Yoriichi's third objective, which is defeating the Demon King. In his first life, the encounter with Muzan was spontaneous. Yoriichi found him by chance, read his anatomy through the transparent world in real time, and improvised a killing technique on the spot. His transparent world sight would have shown him the 7 hearts and 5 brains distributed through Muzan's body. That's how he knew where to strike and in what sequence. Yoriichi was almost there, but the scatter caught him off guard. Reborn Yoriichi walks into this knowing the endpoint, but killing Muzan still isn't going to be easy. You see, he's still going off that one encounter and doesn't know about Muzan's remaining techniques. More importantly, Yoriichi isn't as sharp as he was in canon, because he has a life beyond obsessively hunting down demons now. Yoriichi is aware of this weakness, so he comes up with a plan. He'll take Michikatsu with him. When the two brothers encounter Muzan in the forest, Yoriichi doesn't rush forward, because he can't let Muzan know that this is a trap. They stand face to face with the Demon King, analyzing him through the transparent world and searching for any weaknesses they can exploit. Just as they finish evaluating the situation, Muzan attacks, forcing Yoriichi and Kokushibo to split up as the bamboo forest gets torn up behind them. Attacking 2 targets splits Muzan's focus, but Yoriichi knows the Demon King will eventually realize this and focus fully on killing one of them. So Yoriichi goes for a total kill from the first movement. The intent is there and his sword is already glowing bright red. While Michikatsu distracts the Demon King, Yoriichi rushes in to execute the 13th form of sun breathing, even more accurately than he did in the original timeline. But of course, we know that no amount of accuracy is enough to take out Muzan in one go, and it's at this point that he explodes into 1800 pieces. Yoriichi is waiting for it, but the battle is fundamentally different thanks to Michikatsu's presence, and the scatter doesn't follow the same pattern as the original timeline. In his first life, 1500 fragments destroyed in an instant was already a display beyond comprehension, and that's why Yoriichi brought Michikatsu along. He couldn't possibly trust himself to catch all 1800 pieces if they took even a slightly different pattern, but with Michikatsu to clean up anything he misses, their odds improve significantly. The theory holds here because Michikatsu was even beyond the modern Hashira in skill, and the initial Yoriichi doesn't need to be stronger than he was for it to work out. There's one wrinkle worth acknowledging. Because Muzan's scatter was somewhat unpredictable even to Yoriichi, it might be too much for Michikatsu to follow at all. Yoriichi could try to teach Michikatsu about what he could expect from the Demon King, but the butterfly effect of this is once again too big of a risk for Yoriichi to take. But there's still an answer, and that's the transparent world. We know that the transparent world gives demon slayers an almost precognitive ability to track opponents' movements. So if Michikatsu masters the technique before they fight Muzan, he should be able to take out 300 fragments. And this is a realistic target for Yoriichi because he knows his brother is a prodigy and has a legitimate reason to ensure that Michikatsu can access the transparent world. All of this means that Muzan's reign ends in the Sengoku era. And this brings us to Yoriichi's final regret, the state of the Demon Slayer core. With Muzan dead, the central threat is gone, and given that there's no Kokushibo in this timeline, the upper moon structure never fully forms. But Yoriichi doesn't know this for sure. Maybe he failed to kill Muzan this time as well, and some fragments escaped underground. And even if Muzan was eliminated, there's still the question of other demons that would be roaming around hunting humans. With Uta alive, Yoriichi has a reason to stay invested in the future, because someday, when he's not around, demons could threaten his children. So Yoriichi stays in the core and teaches new demon slayers. He does what canon confirms he was extraordinarily gifted at, tailoring breathing style and instruction to individual practitioners, finding what works for each body rather than imposing a single template. The fascinating side effect here is what happens to sun breathing's preservation. In his first life, Yoriichi passed the techniques to Sumiyoshi unintentionally, and it was preserved as a dance with no one knowing its true purpose. In the rebirth timeline, with Muzan gone and the core intact, sun breathing doesn't need to survive as a secret kept alive by coal burners. Sumiyoshi's descendants still practice the Hinokami Kagura, but with the Demon Slayer core, sun breathing survives through a lineage of Hashira. The core that Yoriichi leaves behind in this timeline isn't the broken, fragmented shadow that spent 500 years trying to finish what he started. It's the completed version of what he was always trying trying to build. With the Demon Slayer core operating at full capacity, demonkind as a whole is pushed into hiding within a decade. Attacks still happen, but they're few and far between, and every time an incident is reported, the Demon Slayers quickly hunt down the perpetrator. Near the end of Yoriichi's lifetime, the last Upper Moon is executed by the Demon Slayers. In this timeline, he doesn't die fighting his brother. Michikatsu dies at 25 because of the Demon Slayer mark, but he's given a hero's burial thanks to his role in taking down the Demon King. Uta passes away during Yoriichi's lifetime as well, but this is far less tragic as her death is by natural causes. As he lays on his deathbed, Yoriichi is surrounded by his kids, grandkids, and disciples, and this is perhaps his greatest achievement after rebirth. Instead of going through his life as a lonely swordsman forsaken by everyone, Yoriichi lived his life to the fullest, surrounded by the ones he loves. But what do you think of this timeline? Is it too perfect? Could Muzan have survived the battle against Michikatsu and Yoriichi? As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below.